The world is full of life, but not all life continues on. And if it's not documented or discovered, how can we ever know about it? Join us as we talk about some extinct animals you probably never knew were real. The Megalodon. Now, we'll admit that you probably did know about this one, but not for the reasons of it actually being real. You've likely heard about the Megalodon because of B movies that show it somehow being alive and being even bigger and more monstrous than it actually was. Thank you a lot, Sci-Fi Channel. Still though, the Megalodon was actually a real creature, and it was a true terror of the seas. These beasts were truly massive and could grow up to 54 feet long. That's basically double the size of most great white sharks. Now, just think about that one for a little bit. So what happened to the Megalodon? Well, scientists believe that the Megalodons were actually so aggressive that they would eat one another. Add that to the fact that their food supplies began to dwindle, you can imagine how much they actually eat, and then they simply all died out. One thing is for certain though, if these beasts did still exist, people would probably think twice about swimming in any kind of area that they exist in. Oh, and also, Spielberg would have probably made Bruce a lot bigger in Jaws. Gigantopithecus. From Jaws to Planet of the Apes, it's honestly not really that much of a surprise that there was an ape that grew into massive size. But what sets the Gigantopithecus apart was just how big that it could actually get. The ape grew to be 10 feet tall, and it would tower over all other apes and gorillas that it came in contact with. What's more is that some scientists believe that this ape was actually so tall that it could walk bipedal just like a human. That's an interesting thought, but also a terrifying one. Not only was it tall, but it was also enormously strong, right down to its teeth. Scientists say that its teeth could get through even the toughest of meats. So just try and picture if one of these apes was still alive. And now imagine some construction workers tearing down a forest where they live. That's a bad combination, because no doubt would they wreak havoc on them to defend their homeland, but it also makes us glad that we only have to deal with average human height apes, and not the monsters that could easily kill us in an instant. The giant swan. If you're looking for grace and beauty, you just can't go wrong with the giant swan. What more details could you need? Because it's a giant swan, so use your imagination. In all seriousness though, these birds did exist, but just because it had size doesn't mean that it was equipped to survive. In fact, its large body likely made it so that it couldn't fly, which caused it to be grounded for its entire life. Although, you have to imagine how much wind they could kick up when they did start flapping those massive wings. Probably likely to a jet engine. And that's a scary thought by itself. So what exactly did happen to the giant swan? Well, being grounded would of course make it vulnerable to attack, and scientists believe that a combination of climate change and the threat of predators made the swan unable to last. The Irish Elk. Now, there was once a breed of elk that was so huge, its antlers actually spanned 12 feet long, and we're speaking of course about the Irish Elk. In fact, the Irish elk had such a massive rack that if they were still around today, they would no doubt be a focus of an entire hunting season. One could only imagine walking into the living room to find a set of these tacked up onto the wall. The cool thing is, there's real proof that these creatures actually existed, and some complete skeletal remains are actually in museums right now. The Irish elk is said to have died out about 5,000 years ago. And there's some debate about how they actually did perish. Some believe that humans hunted them into extinction, while others think that humans shortened the food supply that the elks would eat. Then there's the possibility that the nutrients that were needed to keep their bodies strong enough to support their horns just simply weren't available where they lived. Nobody really knows for sure. These creatures actually didn't live in Ireland either. Before their demise, they actually lived in Asia. Elasmotherium. The Elasmotherium were without a doubt one of the more feared creatures on the planet simply because of its horn. Now you're probably thinking to yourself that they used that horn to attack. In fact, they did, and scientists note that their legs were perfect for galloping. So in addition to spearing whatever they wanted to with perfect ease, they were able to build up momentum before destroying their targets. And yet, you may be surprised to hear that they were actually herbivores. It's also said that they used their horns to dig, for what nobody knows for sure, and to attract the females of their species as well. But arguably the most cool part of it all is that there are numerous paintings and caves that were done of the Elasmotherium, some of which have been traced back to the 1800s. The Great Auk. They say that history is written by the victors, and if penguins are victors, then the Great Auk is the loser. These creatures died out about 150 years ago, and ironically, they were discovered long before penguins were ever known to exist. Adding to the irony, the word penguin was actually a nickname for the Great Auk. Oh, and to further top it off, the two species aren't even related to each other. Comparing the two, the biggest difference between the Great Auk and the penguins of today would be their beaks. Penguins don't really have much of a beak, while the Great Auk has one that seems to have some serious protection power behind it. Scientists believe that it may have been used to break stuff open like nuts or the shells of its food. The other sad irony about the Great Auk is that they were hunted into near extinction. The laughing owl. Now technically, there are species of laughing owl that do still exist today. The one we're talking about, however, was native to New Zealand. The obvious question is, why is it called a laughing owl? Well, when the owl would make a hooting noise, it would sound like a laugh, but not just any kind of laugh. It actually sounded kind of evil. Some people even likened it to the sound of a madman's laugh, which is not exactly something you want to hear while you're walking alone or in an unfamiliar part of New Zealand in the dark. Here's a fun twist on the tale though. Despite being extinct now, they were once regarded as pets, which just goes to show how much had to have happened to these birds for them to truly die out, because they also laid eggs. The reason behind their extinction is actually tied to the dwindling of their habitats due to human expansion, as well as them being forced to change their food habits. This apparently prompted more vicious predators to hunt them down, and by the time the 1930s rolled around, there were no longer any laughing owls in New Zealand. The Falkland Islands wolf. Now, I'm not going to lie, I absolutely love wolves. What instantly drew me to this creature wasn't just the wolf part of its name, but its unique look. The Falkland Islands wolf looks like a mix of several different species, especially in the face. And because of that, it's been called a dog and a fox as well as a wolf. But people sometimes don't really know exactly what it was. Well, scientists believe that there were very low numbers of the Falkland Islands wolves for a long time, and that's when humanity came knocking. Apparently, these creatures had a very trusting nature, which would lead humans to basically hunt them into extinction. One very famous human actually studied them and believed that they would indeed go extinct sooner or later. That man was Charles Darwin. The bluebuck. Speaking of hunting things into extinction, we talk about the bluebuck. This creature may be self-explanatory, but it's still really cool to think about. Bluebucks were native to South Africa for some time, and as for its name, the coloring of its fur, which was black and yellow, made it seem like the creature had a bluish tint to it. Nobody's really sure how that happened, but documented, it certainly looks that way. Like all other creatures that lived in Africa, the creature liked grass and being on the open plains. So what exactly happened to the bluebucks? Well, a lot of things really. Africa began to change, and this would greatly affect the species. For example, there were a lot of new creatures that were entering the area that challenged them for food and living space. Some of them are believed to be predators, while others were just occupants like sheep. Then you add in the human factor, which no doubt hunted them down for food and their antlers, as well as diseases that swept through the plains. Barabary lions. One very sad tale of extinction is very recent, and it's entirely the fault of humanity for the creature's extinction. We speak about the Barabary lion. Also called the Northern African lion, these majestic creatures were literally hunted into extinction, the last documented case of killing being in 1942. Though these lions populated many areas of Africa, including the Barbary Coast where they get their name, they were slowly hunted down as humanity spread from one area to another. Sadly though, the lions, which only looked different from other lions mainly because of the coloring in its fur, were viewed as prizes. Kings, rulers, and more were given the dead lions as gifts. The tragedy of it all is that these lions were rather unique to begin with, as they would travel in small packs and prides, something that most lions rarely ever do. Now, there are rumors that say that certain lions in captivity right now are actually descendants of the Barabary lion, and that means that there could potentially be a way to bring them back. No matter what, our hope is that humanity will learn to protect the lions, because though they are the kings of the jungle, they aren't at the top of the food chain anymore. The blue-ringed octopus. When first thinking about deadly ocean creatures, you probably get the theme to Jaws stuck in your head. However, sharks aren't the only thing in the water that can be deadly to humans. This member of the octopus family can actually kill a person just as easily as a stingray or a shark. The blue-ringed octopus has a natural defense mechanism that causes the blue rings surrounding its body to light up. If you ignore those rings, you're probably going to succumb to the blue-ringed octopus's other natural defense. Because